Aloha and Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Hey, so you know where we are. We're here now, duh. I wanted to make this video and I called it a universal language. So I want to talk about why I entitled the video Universal Language. So let's see who will tune in for this special video. So this is the topic I chose for Shabbat, the universal language, because Shabbat is about unity. It's about unifying the masculine and the feminine, the two back into the one. It's about calling in your spirit into your body seen as the masculine aspect, and your spirit seen as the feminine. So Shabbat is essentially a feminine spirit that we welcome in to unite with this body here right now. And so in that spirit of unification, I wanted to talk about this universal language. It's necessary for us to find or create a universal language. And first of all, anything we can create is already within us. So ultimately it's find or access what's already there. So it is necessary to access a universal language that must be innate to unify us. If our goal here is to manifest a reality and a reflection of our harmonious nature as one, then it makes sense that we would need to find a language where we can further unify. So going back to the story of the Tower of Babel, for example, the word or language was the thing that separated us, right? It's metaphorical, of course, and so the message behind the story is what's very important. Words can unify or they can separate. Energy can unify or it can separate. So how then do we create or access a universal language? A language that we can all use to further unite the self. And a lot of people will say that the universal language is love, that love is a universal language. And of course it is, because we are love. Love just is. So how do we get to the experience of simply just allowing that? Well, we can do that right here, right now. And the more we do that collectively, individually and then collectively, the more we will see this universal language, the way we communicate, unfold organically. And simply by being the witness, we will experience and extract the formula to begin to create this language, or at least access it, this universal language of love. So what is this universal language that I'm talking about that is going to lead us to this unification, this love? And the answer is archetypal communication. Why? We have this old story of creation, the beginning, Genesis. And this story of creation is in our DNA. And the story is really, at its roots, a story of how the one became the two, and then the three back to the one. That's what it all is. Our story of creation that's in our very DNA is the story of the duality back into the oneness, and then back and forth again and again. And this story is reflected over and over by and through all of us, across all timelines. Everything that we experience in life, everything we think, everything we do, reflects this story of creation. We can't help that. So when we get lost in our own details, in the details of our individual lives, we forget that they all are really reflections of one very simple, original story. So when we can remember our unified story, we can begin to understand our roles here now. We can begin to understand our roles in the masculine and the feminine aspects, within and without, in all dimensions, in this physical one, in the mental realm, in the spiritual realm, in the emotional realm. We begin to understand who we are and why we're here. Why do I feel these emotions? What are emotions? How do I apply them to my experience? What are they in reflection of me? Where do they come from and where do they go? And so instead of saying, hey, this is who I am all of these stories, this pain, this hurt, or this job, or this relationship, we say, wow, all of this is just unfolding to remind me of the original story. And so when I remember that story and I begin to act from that archetypal place and also respond to that archetypal place. So I begin to speak to you from that archetypal place, and I also begin to hear you from that archetypal place and story. It immediately, organically puts you in a position to effortlessly embody the highest virtues. You don't have to try them. All of a sudden, you stop taking things personally, stop making assumptions. All of a sudden, we know that we are here to do our best, and there's no way around that. Because what happens when we communicate from that archetypal space, reflective of our original story, we begin to accept our true responsibility and purpose here in this life. It's no longer about us, it's about us. We remember our mission and our original story, that we're here to unify, that we're here to bridge the worlds. So yeah, it's easy then to embody the one thing that is so necessary to embody on this path, which is compassion. We can embody compassion in all aspects when we speak and live from this archetypal place of remembrance. We accept our responsibility. Oh yeah, that's why I'm doing all these things. It looks like I'm doing all these things, but really what's happening behind all of the doing and the thinking? It's all ritual to heal something that started a long time ago, the very beginning, in fact. It really helps us to depersonalize, to take ourselves out of whatever stories we've been telling ourselves and say, I'm here for something so much bigger. I'm here to accept my role and part in this healing journey for the one. It's not just for me, it's for me, of which we're all a part. And I must accept this responsibility now that I know, now that I understand from an archetypal lens. I have no choice but to do my best. It's my duty, and I know that now. And looking the other way, I'll only be deceiving myself, the self which is one. And it's easy for me to not take things personally now because I have compassion through the understanding that the reason you're hurt, or I'm hurt, or we're hurt is because of something that began a long time ago that had nothing to do with our personalities in this present moment. It has everything to do with the archetypal energies and personalities behind it. And so I'm not going to take it personally when somebody attempts to hurt me, because I can only be hurt if I allow myself to be hurt. And because I know why they're hurting me, I can forgive them immediately. There's not even a need for such a thing as forgiveness, because the forgiveness is innate. It's already a natural part of the process. We understand that forgiveness must be given to make any progress, for example. So when we speak from this archetypal place, and when we experience life from this archetypal space, when we receive and transmit information in form of word or even thought or action, we're really aligning ourselves with our highest truth as one. Why do we even need a universal language? Why do we need language at all? What is the purpose of a language? To communicate. Why do we need to communicate when everything is within? Well, that's why we're here in this physical realm. What is the use of ego? What is the purpose of ego? Many will say, kill your ego. Don't kill your ego. There's no killing it. There's no need to kill anything. The ego has a place. That's why it exists. It's not by accident. The individual personality as the ego was given to us so that individually in our own beautiful ways, we can come together in this physical realm and actually communicate and enjoy the journey, not just the end result, but the journey to getting to a whole new space. So we do need the ego. And in order to communicate from that higher place of the ego in service of the spirit, in order to communicate and work together from that space, we do need a language. Just like that ego has to be a reflection of our nature so that it's built upon a sustainable foundation so that the ego is rightfully used, so is the language, the word. Our words simply just need to be aligned with nature. They need to be built upon a natural system. This is why Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, is really built upon geometry. This is Kabbalah. So when we understand that our language has to be reflective of this geometry, the pattern that is our DNA, we can rewrite that language. And one way that everybody can do, because, I can't say, hey, everybody learn Hebrew right now. That's something totally different, which we can get into. Something we all can do right now is learn our story. Storytelling is shamanism. This is in every culture understood and acknowledged, that the storytellers were the shamans. And you guys, there's only one story behind all others, that we are one. The one is the one story. The one is the story. Ever being rewritten, the one is the circle of life, but that circle is also a spiral. So the one, just like that circle, is always expanding. The story, as it's being read from new perspective, as we shift and grow, is also being rewritten. That same story being read is being rewritten each time we read it. We're never reading the same story, so therefore we're always creating a new reality in reflection of that newness as we read it each time. And so if we just understand that aspect of shamanism as storyteller, that we all have that within us, or at least those ones who can see that, be that, please. Now I'm inviting you. The whole universe is really inviting you and is asking you and is calling you, beckoning you to know that you are a storyteller, and the only story we need to tell is the one. And if you're Jewish, or maybe you're not, you've heard of the Shema prayer. This is the main prayer, and this is the one that goes on your doorpost, the one that's meant to be acknowledged first and foremost, and also last and first. That everything is one, and tell your children and make sure they tell their children, and so on and so forth, because this is the only thing that really needs to be preserved. If there was one thing that needs to be preserved, it's our story of our oneness. And what is that? The story of creation, Genesis, which is the story we read in synagogue on Friday, last Friday, and we're going to tell the second story now, because we just restarted the Torah. So Genesis, the story of our creation, the beginning story, is the story of our oneness. And this is the only story that we need to pass down. So rather than learn Hebrew, right, like I said, what we can all begin to do now is share that story with each other of our oneness, and reflect that story to each other however we will. And in doing that, we begin to embody the archetypes. We begin to understand each other and communicate with each other from that space of compassion. We begin to speak to each other in a new way and create a whole new world because of this. A world that is built by all those who are walking a virtuous path. Because like I said, what happens when we begin to effortlessly, through telling our story, embody the energies of those archetypes? What happens? Through embodying those archetypes, we embody the highest virtues. We don't need to struggle to be honest. We don't need to try to maintain being a good person and not being jealous. We don't need to strain to honor our mother and our father. It becomes easy to follow a path of righteousness. It becomes the only way. It becomes a natural product of simply being present and reflecting, or even speaking, but just reflecting our creation story, which holds our truth, the truth, that we, that it, that all is one. So language, or the word, doesn't need to divide. In fact, there are so many people that think, God, the word just gets in the way. Speaking just gets in the way. It can, But there are those who know, and there are more who are going to know now through the remembrance that storytelling is shamanism, that the word does not have to be used negatively, that the word can be used in the opposite, in a positive way, that there is absolutely a need for a universal language. So please don't see speaking or words as a way of separation. It can be, and it often is, but hold that hope and be an example and an inspiration of the future as a storyteller telling the right stories. The one story, the only one. You don't need to remember much, you don't need to do much to tell that story, because the telling is in the being. You are it. So the more you know it, you become that storyteller, you become a living expression of that truth. The living word. I'm pretty sure there are 10 million churches and temples named the living word. This is why. This is the metaphysical understanding behind the name of all of those sacred places. Because you are the church, you are the temple, you are the living expression of truth. You have the potential to be, and it's up to you. Free will is the gift. You have the choice to be that or not. Without the choice, you wouldn't have the motivation to keep going, to keep living, to keep trying again and again, to keep getting better and better and better. So anytime you feel frustrated or discouraged when you're communicating and you can't seem to get a point across, don't judge whether it's you not communicating correctly or it's that person who's just not receiving my words. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just look a little deeper and you'll find that it's because the information that you're trying so hard to reveal, or that the person who is seemingly separate from you is struggling to deflect. That information is probably not necessary. It's probably because that information is so skewed and far from the truth of our original story that it's not necessary for it to be heard. So it's not. Everything is in perfect order. If you're not being heard, it's because you're not meant to, for whatever reason. If your truth is not being heard, it's not meant to in that moment, period. And this is most likely when you look a little deeper, like I said, because it is not really a close reflection of our truth. And so the more we remember that, and we just begin to embody and express the truth of our oneness as our story, the more we organically embody the virtues, organically access a universal language, and organically manifest collectively a whole new world. Thank you for tuning in for this Shabbat message. I appreciate all of your efforts to unify the world, to remember that we are in it, in this world, but we are not of it. And it's in the acceptance of that that we marry the two, unite the two worlds back into the one. As the third, the middle path, the human, the spirit embodied. Thank you for doing that work in unification in all dimensions, across all timelines, throughout time and space. Shabbat Shalom. Until next time.